Biden campaign today announced $280 million in media reservations between now and November 3rd. They're saying that's the largest that's in election history, that no campaign has ever made a reservation that big. It's $220 million in television ads and $60 million in digital ads. They're targeting 15 battleground states, and I think that just really shows that they feel like they're in a strong position here for the final 90 days to the election. The battleground states break down. There's 6 core battleground states: Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Arizona, North Carolina, and Florida. So they didn't give us a state-by-state breakdown, but you'd have to imagine that most of their spending will be in those 6 states. That represents sort of their clearest path to 270 electoral votes. They're also going to be putting ads up on the air in states that Hillary Clinton won in 2016. So as sort of a defensive play to make sure that they don't see any slippage in Colorado or Virginia or New Hampshire, some of those states, Minnesota as well. Some of those states Trump has talked about playing in, but we haven't seen the Trump campaign go up on the air in those states yet. But kind of the interesting piece that really grabbed the headlines is the Biden campaign moving into some of these traditionally red states, states that Trump won easily in 2016. Texas and Georgia are 2 states that have not gone for the Democratic presidential nominee in decades. Polls show tight races there. I know a lot of Republicans are still a little doubtful that those states are ready to go blue, but the Biden campaign has made reservations there. And then Ohio and Iowa, also 2 states that really weren't on anyone's radar as battlegrounds, but that appear to be competitive based on polls that we've seen. And the Trump campaign has spent money in both Ohio and Iowa, so I think they do see a little bit of slippage as well. Probably a steep climb for Biden in all 4 of those traditionally red states, but they say that they've got a lot of pathways to 270, that the polling sort of supports these moves right now, and they don't want to leave anything on the table. So it's a pretty bold strategy, and we'll see how it plays out.
Well, when it comes to the election, again, coronavirus truly dictates every facet of American life right now. And what we know is that the main issue for voters right now is who's going to have a plan to help the nation recover from coronavirus. Second to that is who's going to restore trust in the American government. On both of those issues, former Vice President Biden continues to have a lead. More Americans think that he'll do a better job with those. And, typically, Americans tend to elect a candidate that they believe is doing the best job or a better job on the main issue facing the country right now.
I mean, obviously Donald Trump is in some difficulty as far as the polls are concerned. They have consistently shown him lagging Joe Biden by a significant amount. So therefore, for the Trump campaign, there's obviously a need to bring Biden down. It's not only about trying to bring President Trump's ratings up. And I think increasingly we are seeing this effort to try to tie him to the most left-wing elements in the Democratic Party. Now, setting aside the fairness or otherwise of that, the effort, it seems to me, clearly intended to engender a kind of concern among moderate voters, maybe voters in the suburbs. Suburban voters is a bloc or a demographic that President Trump has had a lot of difficulty with. He has seen quite a lot of erosion in his position with those voters. The Trump campaign paused its advertising, which is quite unusual at this stage of a presidential campaign, to sort of recalibrate things. And this happened a short time after Bill Stepien had taken over as campaign manager. Brad Parscale had been demoted. The first couple of ads that we have seen from the Trump campaign since then have been really hitting this point about the idea or the accusation that Joe Biden is in thrall to left-wing elements in the Democratic Party. We've seen commercials that show Bernie Sanders, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and others. So I think that's really the Trump campaign's gambit. Strategically speaking, the Trump campaign also emphasizes that really, if the president can hold Florida and win just one of the so-called blue wall states, that's Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, he could be in good shape, whatever the national polls say. And so I think we'll see a lot of emphasis in the geographical emphasis there as well.
But we wanted to start with some major election results from last night. Let's start with the biggest headline of them all, which is progressive challenger Cori Bush, Justice Democrat, has knocked off Lacy Clay Jr., member of the CBC. He and his father combined have represented this district in Missouri, which includes St. Louis, includes Ferguson, for more than 50 years. So this is a huge, earth-shattering development. Of course, we saw AOC take out Joe Crowley. We saw Jamal Bowman take out Elliot Engel. And now we have Cori Bush taking out Lacy Clay. Let's take a little listen to a little bit of what she had to say last night in her victory speech.
They counted us out. They called me, I'm just the protester. I'm just the activist. With no name, no title, and no
It's a great question, because on the one hand, there is clearly an ascendancy of more progressive or left-wing politics within the Democratic Party, and we saw that in the primary elections you mentioned, not just in terms of candidates winning, but in, for example, Congresswoman Tlaib rebuffing a challenge really with much greater ease than many people expected. So you do have that rising tide of progressivism within the Democratic Party. I think, though, that is different or distinct from trying to suggest that Joe Biden himself is left-wing or could be sort of, metaphorically speaking, taken hostage by left-wing Democrats. One of the challenges, which I noted in the piece for the Trump campaign, is that Joe Biden has been a frontline political figure in this country for all of my lifetime, first elected to the Senate in the 1970s, obviously a couple of terms as President Obama's vice president. So he's a very familiar figure to voters. I think to many voters, he's quite a reassuring figure, certainly not a radical one. And I think that makes the Trump campaign's efforts more difficult. They face a fairly uphill climb, I think, in trying to paint Biden himself as sympathetic to or representative of that tendency.